Hey guys, first regardsman here. I'll be talking about the biggest controversy that's been going on for Space Marine 2 behind the scenes at Saber Interactive. And to talk about this with me, I have brought on Jefficus. Now, Jeff, they have recently hired Chief Business Officer Steve Allison at Saber Interactive. This is a huge shakeup at the company for multiple reasons, but a lot of people have a bad opinion of this guy, mainly because of some other prior things he worked on, like the Epic Game Store. And I'm curious what you think about his new role at Saber.
Yeah, so Steve Allison was previously the VP over at Epic, and he's responsible for what a lot of the Epic Game Store looks like today. And I mean that in a very positive way because the Epic Game Store has come a very long way since its inception quite a long time ago. They've been trying to effectively just copy Steam and just try to act more like a not a replacement for it, but they want to coexist with it. They want to try to get a little piece of the pie where you can't really compete with Steam. This has been something that Microsoft and Sony have also admitted. Like Steam just dominates the PC gaming market. But with that being said, the reason why Saber is bringing Steve on board is mostly because they're very interested in self-publishing games. So there is a future here where Space Marine 3 gets released and they don't have Focus basically hovering over them with pull up entertainment. And Saber is completely independent. You don't have Focus, you have potentially less microtransactions or the exact same amount that we have in Space Marine 2 because Saber simply doesn't need a publisher anymore.
A lot of people were wondering why they even brought on Steve Allison in the first place, and it seems like he has the connections in the industry that they actually want. And even though many players have a bad opinion of Steve just because they think he either put Telltale Games in the ground when he started working there like 2010 with their games and things like that, I think that Saber is kind of gearing up for like not only a live service model like we talked about before for Space Marine 3, but also just to have their self-published games, probably their own launcher and things like that. And like you said, Steam absolutely dominates the market. That trying to move out of like the the general ecosystem of Steam is basically impossible, but working around it just seems to be the best decision for them. Now, something really interesting here is that Steve Allison responded to somebody's worries about them trying to squeeze more money from players, and we saw a post response from Steve saying, "My job isn't to squeeze money from Saber's products through tactics like that. We're prepared to do more self-publishing, and I'm here to organize a group in preparation of the lineup forming for 2028." And then he includes Space Marine 3, John Wick, hopefully the KOTOR remake, and a few unannounced titles. So it sounds like we just found out that Space Marine 3 is coming in 2028, and he probably wasn't supposed to say that here in this response. That is almost certainly from insider information since he's now working
Mhm.
there, or he got information from them on their upcoming game. So what do you think about that?
I think he definitely just revealed Space Marine 3's release date. I think that these games, Space Marine 2 was set to have a 4-year development pipeline. It released in 2024, and Space Marine 3 was confirmed to be in development. I think a couple
March of
months.
2025, I believe.
Yeah, a couple months after Space Marine 2 launched. And keep in mind that just the pre order sales for Space Marine 2 were likely sufficient for this game to have already paid for itself. And we've already talked many times about how Space Marine 2 is Saber's greatest financial success. And I would imagine that they're probably sitting there having to split all this money with Focus and with Steam and with Microsoft and with Sony, and they don't like the fact that the pie, and a little bit to Games Workshop as well, because the licensing fees, they don't like the fact that this pie is cut a little too thinly, and they're left with at the end of the day is probably not as much profit as they would like. And so to me, bringing someone like Steve Allison on and pursuing self-publishing seems to be the best thing that they could possibly do for themselves and creatively for Space Marine 3.
I mean,
honestly.
it kind of explains the comments here from Steve that he's pretty clear that they don't want to do MTX, like they've mentioned multiple times, that like they don't want to change things going into Space Marine 3. He says Space Marine 3 is going to be all the things you love about 2, plus more at least the things you call out that you love about it. He also mentioned directly in another statement that the voice pack DLC issue on Space Marine 2, the team learned a lot from that, and that's a pretty huge thing because we mentioned this before that the community response to the voice pack DLC, not taking that from Saber, has permanently set the baseline for the company going forward and how they handle DLC like that. And I saw some people saying that it was unfortunate people had such a controversy over that DLC. People were just complaining. The thing is, when you're a customer and you put your foot down like that, you will have these companies respond if the money is going to be taken from them. And that's exactly what we're seeing here, that their new hire for their self-publishing, he is directly referencing this as something that they are still aware of as a major controversy for them that they don't want to repeat the mistakes of. So that has pretty much firmly planted Saber's mindset, in my opinion, on how they want to handle some of the monetization in Space Marine 3. It will probably be monetized a bit more heavily, but they're going to approach it in a different way than they would have, I would assume.
Additionally, Steve does specify that he's never worked on things like Fortnite or Rocket League, and so he'd never worked on the microtransaction systems behind those games. And so he's not bringing a lot of vast live service experience over to Saber. Saber is kind of just picking that up as they update Space Marine 2, which is why Space Marine 2 has been getting better and better updates as it's existed for longer and longer. He's more so coming from the Alan Wake side of things, where these are just single release story experiences, which Space Marine 3 is definitely going to benefit from. Saber is looking to be a company that develops and self-publishes Warhammer 40k games of Space Marines from the Black Templars, and you get a Dark Souls type game, or having a Tau versus Imperial Guard Battlefield or Battlefront style Warhammer 40k game. If they're going to be those guys, then they definitely want someone who's more keen on basically releasing or introducing these single player story experiences to their company as well, because up until this point, Saber has a pretty random catalog, but they seem to be very big on those co-op horde shooters like World War Z, for example.
Toxic Commandos
And so,
as well.
yep, or Toxic Commando. So being able to expand into 40k, because they've already got those relationships with Games Workshop, and being able to introduce more single-player blockbusters, I think is never a bad thing for Warhammer 40k gaming as a whole. You see stuff like Bolt Gun, for example. Bolt Gun is such a fun game, and it's not a game that you spend more than maybe 10 to 20 hours on, and you've beaten it. But it's still a fun experience, and I would like to see more Warhammer 40k games like that. I don't think that's ever a bad thing.
I think in the case of having more 40k games, I think that's something Saber wants to move towards, because they said before that Space Marine 2 was way larger than their wildest dreams in terms of success. And I think that they have turned down multiple IPs, like they mentioned before, in favor of moving more towards Warhammer 40k. And Warhammer 40k as a franchise is just becoming larger and larger over time. Total War 40k is coming out, which will surely do numbers for not just the entire the franchise itself or tabletop, but also the other video games in the space, like Dark Tide, like Space Marine 2. And in this case, I think self-publishing is the way to go. I think the community reaction to Steve Allison being hired has been way overblown. It's he's mainly here for connections, it sounds like, or to help them out with publishing problems they might have, rather than having a pure, we're going to go and take this MTX to an absurd degree, because there's really no evidence of him doing that I could find in other games. Like he said, he'd not work on Fortnite or Rocket League, and a lot of the issues with the Epic Games Store are not necessarily his fault, because we don't have all the information what he actually did there.
Yeah, and I tend to do my due diligence with these developers, producers, and studio heads as well. And I will be the first person to sound the alarm whenever we get someone who has a very bad history with effectively overinflating a studio and selling the studio off to a megacorp like Microsoft or Sony. Like I will be that guy, and I'm sure First Tour Guardsman will be as well, because these are things that obviously not only affect the game, but they affect coverage of these games, and they also affect the entire community. We don't want to necessarily be incorporated in the Microsoft family or whatever they call it, where they've just
Yeah,
laid
with these
off, you know,
corpo
like
families.
5 different freaking studios and like thousands of different employees. You don't want a future like that for Saber. You want them to be a self-publishing private studio that continues to just make games. Like that's their
I
primary
mean,
focus. That's all they need to do.
a lot of the comments we see in the Space Marine 2 community, a lot of the information we get in the game, it comes from Focus Entertainment, not Saber Interactive themselves. Saber's pretty chill. You can actually message the game director of Saber, like on Discord. No response sometimes, like technical questions. So, like, they're actually pretty chill dev team, and they are super helpful with mod authors and stuff like that. The bigger problem here is that a lot of people are not a big fan of Focus Entertainment, and I think the voice pack DLC head controversy, we got flack initially for saying like, oh, this is terrible. Oh, always take the side of the consumer. But at the end of the day, like I said, they're always take the side of the consumer, because they are now in a position where they won't make the same mistake twice, because they're worried about the community reaction. Even the Focus Entertainment community managers, the ones from the publishing company, they have said they are hesitant to release another voice pack DLC because of how the last one went. So that has some pretty huge rippling effects going on at both Focus and Saber, and probably just their own ideas what they want to do, even if they are self-publishing. And because of that, I think the community did an excellent job. And like you said, I will be the first one to sound the alarms if Steve Allison pulls out, like, the super ultra accolade story to buy your accolades to get your heroic weapons. I'll be the first one to say it's bullshit. And I really want Space Marine 3 to be a good game, but if the game sucks because they just over monetize it, I'll probably just be playing Space Marine 2 again. But at the end of the day, I think this is not the worst news ever to have this guy hired. I think people should wait to see how this actually turns out. And we don't even know, like, the monetization scheme of Space Marine 3 is going to be yet, so I would really just hold off on, like, doom posting on that one.
I think the last thing that I have to say about this topic is primarily that when I played Destiny 2, Bungie broke away from Activision and they decided to self-publish for Shadowkeep. Shadowkeep was not that great because they didn't have all the resources they needed at the time. What was really the kicker, though, was Witch Queen. So Witch Queen was a self-published expansion that Bungie put out before they basically sold themselves to Sony. And in my opinion, and this might be a bit of a hot take, Witch Queen was the best expansion that Destiny 2 ever had. My friends and I played Witch Queen so freaking much. And this is kind of the result of a studio like this breaking away from under the umbrella of a publisher and going and pursuing self-publishing. So I look at this as an opportunity. I look at this as something that's very exciting, because I think that Space Marine 3, especially if it does release in 2028 without Focus, is probably going to be the best Warhammer 40k game at that point. I think it can compete with total Warhammer 40k.
I mean, it sounds like they are definitely priming themselves to be in a, position to just take full advantage of that massive cash flow they got from the success of Space Marine 2. And it makes sense they don't want to have, like, the umbrella of Focus or pull up over them, because, like you said, the profits are probably not really want them to be, and also just the independence is not really want it to be. So I think this could be good for Saber, and I think that people are looking a little bit incorrectly on why Steve Allison was hired in the first place. It should look more so at the general company and what their plans are going forward. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments below about Steve Allison being hired. Are you worried about the future of Space Marine 3 in terms of monetization, or do you think this is actually a good sign for them self-publishing? Let me know in the comments below. And also, thank you, Jeff, for coming on here and talking with me about this today. If you guys have not subbed to him, you definitely should. You can find that in the description below. And also, if you haven't subbed to me, you can find me here as usual.
The Emperor protects.